I used to think my hands would never be clean enough, that if I stopped scrubbing for even a second, the invisible monsters I saw on every surface would crawl under my skin and destroy me from the inside out. But I never realized that the real rot wasn't on my skin. It was in the way my own family was using my deepest fear to control every breath I took. Have you ever felt like your own mind was a prison? Or have you ever had someone you love turn the key and lock you inside for their own convenience? My name is Leo, and for as long as I can remember, the world has felt like a minefield of bacteria, viruses, and filth that only I could see, a condition that turned my teenage years into a never-ending cycle of chemical burns from bleach and the suffocating smell of latex gloves. It started small when I was about 10, just a lingering worry about touching doorknobs or sharing a soda, but by the time I hit 16, it had morphed into a full-blown obsession that dictated every waking moment of my life. My routine was a grueling marathon of rituals that started the second I woke up. I couldn't even step out of bed without first checking the floor for any speck of dust. And if my foot touched the ground before I had laid down my safe towels, I had to restart the entire day by getting back into bed and praying that the contamination hadn't traveled up my legs. My parents, Sarah and David, always told me they understood, but looking back, I can see the subtle ways they started to twist my reality to suit their needs. My mom was a perfectionist who loved the fact that our house was sterile because of my compulsions, often praising me for how clean I kept things while ignoring the fact that my knuckles were bleeding from being washed 50 times a day. My younger sister, Maya, was the opposite. She was messy, loud, and increasingly resentful of the rules I had to impose on the household just to keep from having a panic attack. I felt like a burden, a broken thing that everyone had to tiptoe around. And that guilt was the fuel that kept my OCD burning hotter. I spent most of my time in my room, which I had turned into a sanctuary, a green zone, where everything was wiped down with 90% isopropyl alcohol twice a day. I didn't have friends, not really. I had people I talked to online, screens being the only barrier I felt safe behind, because through a screen, no one could sneeze on me or touch my shoulder with unwashed hands. The house became a maze of rules. I remember the time my cousin Toby came over and tried to sit on my bed. I didn't just ask him to move. I felt a physical shock, like electricity, coursing through my veins, and I spent the next 6 hours stripping the sheets, boiling the pillowcases, and scrubbing the mattress with a heavy-duty steamer until I fainted from the heat and the fumes. My parents watched this and didn't offer a doctor. They offered more cleaning supplies. They saw my pain as a tool for a pristine house. The breaking point started during my junior year of high school, when my parents decided they wanted to host a massive family reunion for my grandmother's 80th birthday. The mere thought of 30 strangers, children, and distant relatives breathing in our house, touching the counters, and using the bathroom sent me into a spiral so deep I couldn't eat for 3 days. I begged my mom to move it to a restaurant or a park, but she looked me in the eyes with this cold, practiced sympathy and told me that I was being selfish, that my quirks couldn't ruin a milestone for the woman who raised her. That was the first time she used the word quirks instead of disorder. And it felt like a slap in the face. To make matters worse, my dad started pressuring me to just be normal for one day, suggesting that if I loved my grandmother, I would find a way to suppress the overwhelming urge to scream when someone sat on our couch in outside clothes. They didn't see the terror. They saw an inconvenience. As the day of the party approached, my anxiety reached a fever pitch, and I began to notice things weren't adding up. I would find traps set for me. A dirty dish left in my safe sink, or my sister purposely brushing against me in the hallway just to watch me run to the bathroom to scrub my arm. They called it exposure therapy. But there was no therapist, no gradual progress, just a cruel game to see how much I could take before I broke. I found myself trapped in a house that no longer felt like a home, but a laboratory where I was the panic subject. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep because I was convinced they were letting people into my room while I was unconscious just to prove a point. One night, I woke up to find my door slightly ajar, though I knew I had locked it. There was a faint smell of perfume that didn't belong to me, and my carefully organized desk had been shifted just an inch. When I confronted my dad, he just chuckled and said I was becoming paranoid, that my OCD was clearly getting worse, and that I might need serious intervention. The gaslighting was so subtle at first that I doubted my own senses. I'd ask if someone had touched my toothbrush, and they would laugh and tell me I was imagining things, only for me to find a single stray hair that didn't belong to me. I was losing my mind, caught between the invisible germs I feared and the very real betrayal of the people who were supposed to protect me. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of bleach and lies, and nobody was reaching out to save me. My sister Maya, who used to be my only ally, started acting strange too. She would walk into the kitchen and purposely sneeze toward my food, then mock me when I threw the entire meal in the trash. "It's just a joke, Leo," she'd say, but her eyes were cold. It felt like a coordinated effort to push me over the edge. I started skipping school because the public bathrooms and the shared desks felt like death traps, and instead of helping me catch up, my parents used my absences as more evidence of my instability. They began having long, whispered conversations in the kitchen that would stop the moment I walked in. I felt like a ghost in my own home, a problem that needed to be solved rather than a son who needed to be loved. So that's the situation I was in, trapped in a house where my mental health was being treated like a joke and my boundaries were being intentionally violated under the guise of helping me. I had to decide whether to keep playing their game or to finally stand up for my own sanity, even if it meant tearing my family apart. Before I tell you the extreme lengths I went to and the shocking truth I uncovered about why they were really doing this, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have stayed and tried to endure the party, or would you have walked out? The day of the reunion arrived like a funeral procession. My house, which I had spent years keeping pure, was suddenly invaded by people who didn't care about my rules. I watched from the top of the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs, as kids with sticky fingers touched the walls and uncles with muddy shoes walked across the carpets I had vacuumed in specific patterns for hours. My parents were glowing, playing the roles of the perfect hosts, while I sat in my room, locked from the inside, shaking. But then I heard it. My mother was in the hallway right outside my door, talking to my Aunt Claire. She didn't know I was listening. She told Claire that they weren't actually trying to help me get better. They were trying to break me so that I would agree to go to a state-funded residential facility. My dad had lost his job months ago, something they had kept secret from me, and they wanted the disability check and the freedom of not having to deal with my drama anymore. They were intentionally triggering my OCD to document my outbursts as proof that I was a danger to myself and others. The room spun. The germs weren't the threat, they were. In that moment, the fear that had paralyzed me for years transformed into a cold, sharp clarity. I realized that if I had an outburst now, I was giving them exactly what they wanted. I had to be the calmest person in the room. I opened my door, walked downstairs, and did the unthinkable. I walked right into the middle of the crowded living room. I didn't wear gloves. I didn't flinch. I walked up to my mother, who looked horrified to see me looking so composed, and I hugged her. I could feel her stiffen, her plan crumbling in real time. I spent the next 3 hours acting like the most well-adjusted teenager on the planet. I shook hands, I ate off a plate that I hadn't personally sanitized, and I smiled until my face ached. I saw the confusion and anger growing in my father's eyes. They wanted a scene, and I was giving them a masterpiece of normalcy. While they were distracted by the guests, I slipped into my father's office and found the documents, the applications for the facility, the forged notes about my violent behavior, and the financial records showing their debt. I took pictures of everything with my phone. I even found a diary my mother had been keeping, detailing every time she successfully triggered me to document it for the state evaluators. It was sick. It was methodical. The next morning, after the guests left and the house was a wreck of contamination, my parents sat me down for the talk I knew was coming. They started telling me how worried they were about my behavior at the party, claiming I had been screaming and throwing things. Lies, all of it. They didn't know I had been recording the entire party on a hidden camera I'd set up days prior. When I showed them the footage of me being perfectly calm, and then showed them the photos of their secret applications, and the recording of my mom's conversation with Aunt Claire, the blood drained from their faces. My father tried to grab my phone, but I was faster. I told them that if they ever tried to put me away or if they ever mess with my safe spaces again, I would send all of it to the authorities, the rest of the family, and the state board. I moved out 3 weeks later to live with my grandmother, who was horrified to learn what they had been planning. She was the only one who actually remembered that I was a human being, not a medical case or a financial burden. Living with her wasn't easy, and my OCD didn't just vanish, but without the constant gaslighting and sabotage, I actually started to get better. My grandmother didn't force me to touch dirty things, but she sat with me while I did it myself, cheering me on when I managed to go 10 minutes without washing. My parents tried to apologize later, claiming they were just desperate and didn't know what to do. But some things can't be washed away with an apology or a bottle of disinfectant. They lost their house anyway because they couldn't keep up with the mortgage without the disability money they were hoping to scam from my diagnosis. My sister Maya rarely speaks to them because she saw the truth of what they were doing to me, and the guilt of being part of their games finally ate away at her. I learned that the world is indeed a dirty place, but the most dangerous toxins aren't the ones you can catch on your hands. They're the ones people carry in their hearts. Today, I can hold a doorknob without shaking. I can eat in a restaurant without hyperventilating. I'm still a work in progress, and some days the urge to scrub until I bleed is still there, but I've learned to trust my own mind again, and that's the cleanest feeling I've ever known. Like this video if you were on my side and think I did the right thing by exposing them. And make sure to subscribe for more stories like this where we dive into the darkest corners of human behavior. I really want to hear your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Do you think I should ever forgive my parents, or was their betrayal too deep to move past? I'll see you all in the next story.